Walk into any bike shop right now and look at the floor space. A few years ago, road bikes owned the front window, and gravel bikes were tucked in a back corner next to the hybrids. Today, in a lot of shops, that's flipped. Specialized, Trek, and Canyon all sell more gravel frames than pure road race frames in several major markets, and almost nobody outside the industry noticed the moment it happened. It didn't happen because road cycling got worse as a sport, and it isn't some marketing trick either. It happened because the reasons people buy a bike changed, and gravel bikes happened to answer almost all of them at once. A road bike is still one of the most refined machines a normal person can own. The problem was never the bike itself. The problem was that fewer and fewer riders actually had a place to use it the way it was designed to be used. Start with the obvious one, roads themselves. In most of the United States and a good chunk of Europe, the roads that used to be safe for a skinny 25 or even 28 millimeter tire are more crowded, more distracted, and frankly rougher than they were 15 years ago. And municipal budgets for road maintenance have been squeezed for years, and potholes that would have been patched in a season now sit for years. A road bike with a carbon fork and 23 millimeter tires punishes every one of those cracks straight into your wrists. A gravel bike running 40 to 45 millimeter tires at lower pressure just rolls over it without the rider even noticing the surface changed. It isn't only the potholes. A lot of the low-traffic country roads that used to be the backbone of a good weekend road ride have gotten busier, faster, and less forgiving. More cars, more distracted driving from phones, and narrower shoulders in places where development has eaten into the margins. Riders who used to feel comfortable on a 2-hour loop through farmland now find themselves rerouting around stretches they no longer trust. A gravel bike opens up an entirely different map. Forest Service roads, canal paths, disused rail corridors, and farm access roads become rideable, and most of them see maybe one car an hour instead of one every few seconds. That tire clearance is the whole story in miniature. The UCI-style road race bike was designed around a very narrow set of assumptions: closed courses or lightly trafficked rural roads, smooth tarmac, and a rider whose only goal is speed. Almost nobody who buys a bike today is racing in a closed criterium. They're commuting, they're doing weekend loops that mix pavement and fire road, they're touring, they're riding gravel because gravel is quiet and cars aren't on it. The bike that can do all of that on one frame is the bike that wins the sale, and that bike is a gravel bike. Geometry tells the same story from a different angle. A pure road race frame is built with a long, low front end and a steep head angle, both aimed at putting the rider in the most aerodynamic, most aggressive position possible for sustained speed on smooth pavement. That position is fantastic for racing and miserable for a 4-hour ride on a rough surface because every bump gets transmitted straight through a rigid, low front end into the rider's neck and lower back. Gravel frames flip that priority. Slacker head angles, longer wheelbases, and a taller front end trade a small amount of top end speed for a huge amount of stability and comfort on loose or broken surfaces. For the overwhelming majority of riders who aren't chasing a category result, that trade is an easy one to make. Look at what the big manufacturers actually did with their model lineups once they saw where demand was heading. The Specialized Diverge, which started as a slightly rougher road bike with a bit of extra tire clearance, is now built around Specialized Future Shock suspension system and clears tires well over 47 millimeters. The Trek Checkpoint added a full suspension version, the Checkpoint SL, specifically because customers were asking for more comfort on rough terrain without giving up the drop bar position. Cannondale's Topstone uses a rear suspension system called Kingpin that flexes the seat stays instead of adding a pivot, which keeps weight down while still taking the edge off washboard gravel. These aren't niche products anymore. They're flagship models getting the same marketing budget and R&D attention that used to go exclusively to the Aero road bike. Canyon's Grail is maybe the clearest example of how far the category has come from its dirt road origins. The double-decker handlebar design was built specifically to reduce vibration through the front end at speed, an engineering problem that used to only get this kind of attention on time trial bikes. When a company spends that kind of design effort on comfort and control for what used to be considered a side project, that tells you where the actual demand is. Giant's Revolt and BMC's URS followed a similar path, both adding more frame flex and more tire clearance with every redesign instead of less, which is the opposite direction road race frames have moved in over the same period. Then there's the drivetrain side of things, which quietly removed one of the last real advantages road bikes had. For years, if you wanted a wide range of gears for climbing while still being able to spin out on a descent, you needed a front derailleur and 2 chain rings, which meant you needed a road bike or a mountain bike because gravel bikes didn't have the gear range to keep up. SRAM's moved to one by only gravel group sets, like Rival XPLR and Force XPLR, paired with wide-range cassettes that now go up to 44 teeth in the back, close that gap. Shimano answered with GRX, which offers both 1x and 2x setups purpose-built for mixed terrain, including clutch-equipped rear derailleurs that stop the chain from bouncing off on rough ground. A gravel bike today can climb a steep gravel pass and still hold a respectable pace on a flat paved section, which used to require 2 different bikes in the garage. The wheel and tire side of the equation matured just as fast. Tubeless setups, which used to be a finicky, mountain bike-only affair, are now the default on most mid-range and upper-tier gravel bikes, straight from the factory. Running lower pressure without the risk of a pinch flat changes how a bike feels on rough ground more than almost any other single upgrade. And gravel-specific rims from companies like DT Swiss and Zip are built wider specifically to support that lower pressure tubeless setup properly. None of this technology is exclusive to gravel bikes on paper, but in practice, it's gravel riders who benefit from it most, and it's gravel bikes that ship with its standard. This is the part that actually explains the sales numbers. Most people don't own 2 bikes. They own 1 bike, or maybe 1 bike, and a beater commuter. If that 1 bike has to handle a paved century ride in the spring, a gravel century in the fall, a grocery run, and the occasional single-track detour, the road bike simply can't do that job. The gravel bike can, or at least it can do, all of those jobs well enough that owning a second, more specialized bike stops feeling necessary. That single bike does everything math matters even more once you factor in cost. A quality road bike and a quality gravel bike together easily run past $4,000. And most riders, especially anyone getting into the sport as an adult rather than racing through junior categories, simply don't have a garage or a budget for 2 dedicated machines. If you're trying to figure out whether your current setup is actually holding you back on mixed terrain or whether it's just a mental block, the honest answer is usually in your tire clearance and your gearing, not in your legs. Drop a comment with what you're currently riding and what kind of terrain you're mixing, and we'll tell you straight whether a swap makes sense or whether a few changes to your current bike get you most of the way there. There's also a cultural shift that doesn't show up in a spec sheet. Gravel racing, led by events like Unbound Gravel in Kansas and the Belgian Waffle Ride in California, built a community around long, hard days on mixed surfaces that feel more like an adventure than a timed effort. Road racing at the amateur level has struggled with participation numbers for a while now, partly because closed course criterium racing is a tough sell to a new rider, and partly because road racing in traffic carries real risk that a lot of people have simply decided isn't worth it anymore. Gravel events, run mostly on low traffic roads and trails, sidestep both problems. You get the structure and camaraderie of an organized ride without needing a permit-closed circuit or a peloton weaving through cars. This shift also changed who shows up to ride in the first place. Road cycling, fairly or not, built a reputation over the last few decades as a sport with a strict dress code, a strict pecking order on group rides, and a fairly unforgiving culture toward beginners who show up on the wrong bike or without the right kit. Gravel riding grew up almost entirely outside that culture. Because the category was new, there was no established hierarchy to break into, and the riding itself, often solitary or in small loose groups on quiet roads, never demanded the same social conformity a road club ride did. A lot of new cyclists, and a lot of cyclists returning to the sport after years away, gravitated toward gravel simply because it felt like a lower pressure way back into riding. The touring and bikepacking crowd pushed the category further in the same direction. Frame mounts for extra bottle cages, top tube bags, and rear racks became standard on gravel bikes years before they showed up on road bikes, because gravel riders were already using their bikes for overnight trips and multi-day rides on mixed surfaces. Companies like Salsa with the Cutthroat and Kona with the Sutra and Rove lines built entire product ranges around this exact use case, further blurring the line between a gravel bike and a light touring bike. A road bike, by contrast, still generally has minimal mounting points because it was never meant to carry anything beyond a saddlebag and 2 bottles. None of this means road bikes are disappearing. A stiff, light, aerodynamic road frame is still the fastest way to move a human body under its own power on smooth pavement, and it always will be. Professional road racing isn't going anywhere, and if your riding is exclusively smooth tarmac with a local club that still does structured group rides, a road bike remains the right tool. But for the much larger group of riders who do a bit of everything and only want to own one bike, the math has shifted, and it shifted quietly enough that a lot of riders only noticed after they'd already made the switch. Component makers noticed the trend before most riders did, which is usually a reliable signal. When SRAM and Shimano start dedicating entire group set lines to a category, and when Specialized, Trek, Canyon, and Cannondale all put their best engineers on gravel-specific frame designs instead of shaving another few grams off an aero road frame, that's not a fad. That's a category that has become the default bike for the average rider, with road bikes settling into the smaller, more specialized role of being the tool you reach for when the terrain and the goal are both exactly right for it. Even bike fit studios have adjusted, with more shops now defaulting to a gravel-first fitting conversation for new customers, instead of assuming road is the natural starting point. Resale value has started to reflect the shift too. A few years back, a used gravel bike sat on marketplace listings longer than a comparable road bike because there just weren't that many buyers looking for one. That pattern has reversed in a lot of regions. Used gravel bikes from brands like Trek, Specialized, and Canyon now tend to move faster than equivalent road models, and asking prices have held up better relative to their original retail cost. For anyone thinking about the category as a long-term investment rather than just a purchase, that alone is worth factoring in. Bike fit and comfort research has quietly backed up what riders were already feeling. Longer, more relaxed geometry, combined with wider tires at lower pressure, reduces the vibration transmitted to the hands, wrists, and lower back over a long ride, which matters more to the average weekend rider than a few watts of aerodynamic saving ever will. Professional racers are optimizing for finishing a race a few seconds faster. Everyone else is optimizing for being able to ride 4 hours on a Saturday and still want to ride again on Sunday. And gravel geometry serves that second goal far better than a race-tuned road frame does. Put all of it together, and the pattern isn't really a mystery. Rougher roads, more traffic, a drivetrain, and tire technology gap that finally closed, a lower pressure riding culture, and a resale market that rewards the category all point the same direction at the same time. That's rarely how trends work. Usually a shift like this happens because of 1 or 2 factors, while everything else lags behind. This one happened because nearly every factor that determines what bike a normal rider should buy moved in the same direction within the space of about a decade, and gravel bikes were sitting right at the intersection of all of them. If you've been riding a road bike and finding yourself avoiding certain routes because of traffic, potholes, or just wanting more variety, that hesitation is worth paying attention to. Tell us in the comments which model you're considering, and we'll break down whether it fits how you actually ride, not just how the marketing says you should ride.